Hello, here we are once again with Mookie Tenembaum. We are exploring through these videos his philosophy, his disillusionism, and in particular the misalgic theory that explains human behavior, trying to illustrate these concepts with facts from everyday life. Week after week, month after month, we've covered the COVID-19 pandemic. We've tried to analyze the war in the Ukraine and other events, following the news even at times. What we are going to try to do today is to give a disillusionist perspective on a concept that is very prevalent, I think, if we try to understand the world today, which is the concept of intimidation. So we are going to try and look at intimidation from this particular philosophical point of view.
Well, the first thing we have to do is to talk, we are not going to talk about intimidation, really. We're going to talk about being intimidated.
Okay.
Which is not the same. Why? Because intimidation could be two sides, somebody intimidated and somebody intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we are not going to go talk about the intimidating part. We're going to talk about the intimidated part, which is us. We live in a full state of intimidation. That's how we live. This is our life. What do I mean by intimidation? I don't mean threat, and this is the important part of it. This is not has to do with Florencio. I don't know if you agree with this, but we're not going to talk about threat. We talk about intimidation. What's the difference? The difference is threat is something active. Means active, I'm talking again, being threatened, being intimidated. Again, always on a passive side. To feel threatened, it's to be awake. It's to suffer. That's a clear suffering. Feeling threatened, it's a suffer. Being intimidated is not. Why am I saying that? Because intimidation happens when we sleepwalk. That means it's not happening. There is no intimidation going on. It is your behavior is the result of different of your I would say your collective intimidations. Everything that intimidated you made you do or not do certain things. That's it. There is no intimidation feeling. You don't feel intimidated. Some people will come to you and say, Florencio, you're being intimidated. You should not be timid. You should, whatever you have to do. That means you have to wake up, and deal with a problem you never had. Interesting enough, you are not being intimidated unless somebody tells you are intimidated, or somebody is trying to intimidate you. Yes, somebody comes with a gun, he's intimidating you. We're not talking about that situation. We're talking about the situation in which our lives really respond to past perceived threats. And those past perceived threats become intimidation, and that intimidation is totally happens totally when you are sleepwalking. It does not happen when you are awake. When you are awake, being intimidated is really being threatened. What do you think about that, Florence?
I think it's an interesting distinction, to say the least, between the awareness of a threat, which, as you said, is usually intense suffering, and such will be committed to memory. We remember the threats we have received in the past, I think. And the fact of being intimidated, that it's simply in the background, right? That's, as you say, part of our everyday sleepwalking. Practical philosophy has made a big deal of threats. They said they are all over, shaping our behavior. But I see what you mean, in the sense that if we were under threat all the time, suffering would be unbearable. We need to sleepwalk. We need to go to sleep, literally speaking. And so intimidation in the background is compatible with this, but constant threats, that's too much for us to bear. There's a third concept, a third term that usually appears with these two in philosophical discussions. I want to ask you about it. It's deterrence. I think it's a complementary concept that adds itself to threats and intimidation. What's the place of deterrence in your particular analysis?
Well, deterrence means somebody, mostly somebody, wants you not to do something. Okay, so first of all, deterrence is about not doing. Okay, you can always claim success in your deterrence in deterrence because somebody didn't do something. He may have forgotten. Yes, he may have not interested in that. Yes, you know, you driving in the car, and there is somebody you know who has the long lights, and you put in the long lights to deter him to stop doing it, and he stops doing it, and you think it's because you put the long lights. 500 reasons behind it, but deterrence really, there is somebody trying to deter. This is very important, and thus deterrence. You know you can be intimidated because somebody is intimidated not to do something. That's called being deterred. Yes, there is a word for that. There is no need to borrow from intimidation into deterrence. So it's two different things. There is a deterrent. There is no intimidator, and this is very important to think. Many of the reasons, the things we are intimidated from, many of them happens just outside. I could be intimidated by two guys walking in the street who are very big and have a big voice, and they have no intention of doing anything to me. They're these two guys are, and I feel intimidated by them. Are they trying to intimidate? Absolutely not. Now, a guy goes around with four, how do you call them?
Bodyguards.
Bodyguards, yes. With bodyguards, that is made for deterrence, okay? Then you feel intimidated. It's all made to feel intimidated. But many of our intimidations, we are born with some of them, Florencio. We are intimidated by height. We are intimidated by the roar of a lion. In fact, we're intimidated by strong strong noises or even lights. We are built to be intimidated, and being intimidated made us, of course, what we are. In Darwin terms, yes, those who were correctly intimidated are those who survived. Of course, somebody will tell you that they were wrong. Of course not. You know how many good things would have happened if you would not have been intimidated. That's what we hear that very often, and it means nothing, of course.
Yeah, we will have to get into that because there's an idealistic value attached to courage and defeating intimidation, right? But these distinctions you are making inside intimidation, I think they are very interesting ones between, I would say, instinctive or innate sources of intimidation and those which are artificial and acquired. And these examples are very good. I mean, huge guys, lions roaring, heights, that comes with our genetic buildup. It's different from lights on a highway. That's a very artificial source of deterrence or intimidation. And I think there's also an interesting distinction between intentional sources of intimidation and those who just happen to take place. But the main question to me at this point is the way you are describing it, there is suffering involved, there is pain even in the background, but it's in the background, right? I'm not feeling it. I'm not aware of it. That's the whole trick, right?
I hear, may respectfully disagree. I don't think there is a background. I think it's not there. What you see is the behavior resulting from. But people are not thinking all the time, wow, this guy is big. I will not hit him. I will not hit him in the face. I will not hit that guy in the face. That doesn't happen. Nobody does that. Okay? Your behavior is the result. Intimidation is seen from the outside, never from the inside. If you feel intimidated, you're really being threatened. You feel threatened, you're not feeling intimidated. Intimidated is not something you can feel, like sleepwalking. And that's the great thing about intimidation. It cohabits, and in certain ways I will get there, but it cohabits. It inhabits together with sleepwalking. That means there are certain things you cannot do while sleepwalking. Feel threatened is one of them. Yeah? There's certain things any emotion that you feel, it's over. Your sleepwalking is gone. But intimidation is not a feeling. Intimidation is a result. Yes. You know, in a mathematical view, it's 2 plus 2 is 4. We're talking about 4 now. We're not talking about how we got there, 2 plus 2 or anything. All it's gone. Now it's 4. And that's how the person lives. In fact, thanks to that he's intimidated, he can sleepwalk. Wow. Yeah. That means intimidation is good not to suffer. Is good. Very important. Intimidation is not a kind of suffering. I repeat, intimidation is not a kind of suffering. You being intimidated, that doesn't mean you're suffering, unless somebody tells you you're being intimidated. And you have to take care of it. As you said many times, it's a value, courage. If you feel intimidated, just go forward. But all that is coming from outside. You were living your life very well. Look, people during the dictatorships and tough dictatorships. I know some of them. The Argentinian one I know quite well. People went through their lives intimidated. That's it. They was just being careful. They doing certain things and other things. They don't. People in North Korea, they are not feeling under threat. They don't live under fear, as the people say. They're intimidated. There's no need for all that. That epics of fear. Yes, that epics. That fear with epics.
It's interesting in itself, this connection between intimidation or being intimidated and sleepwalking. I want to take you a step further. This is a traditional question already in these videos. What happens from a collective point of view? What happens not only for sleepwalking, but for what you call the sync under intimidations? How do sleepwalkers synchronize? Is it also a positive influence? Is it also good for syncing?
To have a good synchronization, you need to have predictability. Nothing more predictable than somebody who is intimidated. So it's easier the way. So, and that of course contributes to the fact that he doesn't wake up while being intimidated, because from the inside and from the outside, everything works. Of course, there's always people who will come to you and they are not pro sync, and they will tell you, sir, you cannot be intimidated. You are a free man. You should go and do something about it. But the idea is that once you are being intimidated, you are good for society. Now, is that good in general? I don't care. I mean, I'm just telling you what happens as a machine, how the machine really works one inside of the other. And it does, it works perfectly.
Amazing. We are almost out of time. I just wanted to mention the fact that we started discussing intimidation and dissuasion and threats because we were looking at the news from the Ukraine. We were seeing Putin parade his nuclear guns. So maybe that particular current example should be mentioned here before the end. You should go back to that particular case of intimidation and dissuasion and threats.
Well, the question is not the war in the Ukraine. The real question about intimidation and deterrence is the atomic weapons. The whole idea of atomic weapons at the beginning was that if I have atomic weapons and everybody else has atomic weapons, we will have what is called a balance of fear, a balance of terror, and we just not going to kill each other, because if we kill each other, we kill everybody, and that's suicide. And it made that every homicide becomes a suicide as well. So the price of homicide is suicide, and that we know it's quite deterrent. It's a big deterrent. So that was the way it was built, to the point that we got accustomed that those atomic bombs are really not for use. They are really to deter. They have no use at all. So when there are wars, and there were many wars in the meantime, in which atomic powers were involved, yes, the United States in many cases, Russia, China, nobody ever even thought about using atomic bombs. During the Vietnam War, at the height of the Vietnam War, and even during the Korean War, there were words about using maybe. It was obviously, it was silent. That's not going to happen. But that intimidation, it went from deterrence to intimidation. So it became in the background. And we are supposedly all intimidated by atomic weapons until you're not. Now, what happens when the country that has the atomic weapons start losing a war? they are going to use atomic weapons. No, they cannot, because it's not fair, it's not nice. They signed agreements, it will destroy the world, blah, blah, blah. So Putin had to remind everybody he has atomic weapons, because he felt deterrence didn't work. So what he did, he started flying bombers, atomic bombers, and moving missiles around the place, and giving speeches in which he hinted to see people, listen, I'm going to use them. Of course, it's all well until you use them. Once you use them, like every threat, it's not a threat anymore. It's something else. And now you deal with something else. So what we see is the need of Putin to move things from intimidation to threat, because they were not listening. They still don't listen. They still sending huge amount of weapons to the Ukraine and not taking into account that Russia has atomic power and they can break the whole thing. Of course, that war ends in 20 seconds with the Russian wars. So now you can start seeing some people talking about he has not yet achieved what he needed to achieve, and that is this to deter, and it doesn't deter anybody. We just seen it this week in Washington with Zelensky. But this is politics and war and collective stuff. So as I said,
but it's interesting as an illustration of the things we were discussing.
As always, I know that what I have to say is not very nice. I just spoke well about intimidation and the threat of a nuclear war, but those are the facts, and that's where we all disillusionists go for the facts.
Amazing. Thank you. See you next time, Mookie.
If you enjoyed the video, please like it, comment and subscribe.